Welcome, gang, to Valgrind. Valgrind is going to be used to check to see if there's any memory leaks in your application. Now, memory leaks, we know they're bad, don't get me wrong, but the thing is it's really important because when you're building an application, it's usually not standalone. Just think of your desktop computer, it doesn't matter, whatever computer and your cell phone. There's other things that are running behind the scenes that may not have anything to do with the current application that you're working on, but there's always a struggle for resources. Even though back in the day, and this is my walking cane thing, our resources were extremely limited. Your cell phones have more computing power than my first desktop computer. There's still a struggle for resources. I mean, if you just look at what Chrome uses just to run and a couple extra windows, it's sucking up a lot of resources that frankly you might need for something else. Or for me, I do a lot of graphic stuff, creating videos and stuff like that, playing games. All that's taking up resources from the graphics card. So there's always a struggle when we get to, well, to arrays and creating those items and then being careful that there isn't a memory leak. So we have to understand when to create and destroy a dynamic array. Do you need a dynamic array? Is the first question you should ask yourself. And if you have a large memory resource that you need, then yeah, it might make sense to go ahead and do that. If you have something that's varying in size, then also it makes sense to use a dynamic array. So there's a lot, make sure that your application really needs it before you do it, because then we have to do some items that we have to worry about in creation and deleting or reallocating the resources back to the heap or to the computer or whatever you want to call it. Because when to delete, usually we know when to create it, but when to delete it could also be, well, interesting. If it's too late and the memory needed gets too large. We could also have too early, but the memory had good data in it and then we needed to reference it again. There's a lot of things. Avoid making sure to avoid this, you want to make sure that you have a game plan. If and hopefully you're using most of your codes inside of some type of object setup, you're going to want to use a constructor and destructor. Remember, a constructor starts off the object. Do you need an internal array for it, a dynamic array for it? That's a great place to start it, which again, usually we know where to do, create it. But then at the end, a destructor is the last thing an object does. That might be a good spot to go ahead and then delete or free up that memory that you don't need anymore. So think about the logical steps of where to create and then make sure that you have that freeing or deletion part at the end of whatever you need to do for that object. So there's really, there's a couple things you have to think about. Could it also be reused? Maybe you need to use it again in the same type of program, same type of run. That's also a lot of items that you need to think about as you're creating and destroying your dynamic array. So think about that really in-depthly in your overall design before we get started with the rest of this.